federal authorities call it an epidemic. Prescription drug abuse is causing overdoses and turning regular people into criminals.
The most permissive drug city in North America.
Addicted and then
the
taking extreme measures to get
There's
more
the
pills,
addiction
heroin
quotient
and
for
cocaine.
heroin.
Stores for crack, stores for, psychoactive, hallucinogenic
Your
drugs.
point is to stop drugs and alcoholism by just people never starting?
You too believe in this fantasy of
This the vicious cycle that you get into, whether it's begging, stealing, you're doing it all day from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to sleep, and it totally takes over your life, and you just become tunnel visioned to your drug addiction and nothing else matters.
So an addiction by a doctor's definition is when the brain compels you to keep doing something such that if you stop doing it, there's painful consequences in your body.
There's a fine line between using an addictive substance or doing an addictive action and actually being dependent.
Most addiction specialists look at usage, problem usage, and addiction. Usage is when somebody uses something that could be addicting. Problem usage is when it starts to cause troubles in their life. Addiction is when somebody has to keep using. And that means that if they don't use, they'll go into withdrawal. And it also means that the same dose of the drug no longer works and they have to escalate the amount they take.
Dr. Meredith, postdoctoral researcher at the University of Connecticut Health Center, stated, although genetically some individuals may be more predisposed to develop an addiction, this does not guarantee that they will. Whether a person is genetically predisposed to develop an addiction or not, under the right environmental conditions, anyone can develop an addiction.
Well, the obvious factor would be family and genetics. We're not sure how much has to do with genetics because it's hard to separate out when you do studies genetics from the family that raises the person. It is clear that there's a strong biological component to this, so strong that if you have a family history of addictions and you don't use at all until the age of 21, your chances of lifetime addiction after that are only 1%, even if you try heroin.
There are a variety of addictions, and you can become addicted to something as common as alcohol or as rare as eating mattresses. The most well-known addictions are that of drugs and alcohol. Practically everyone in the United States can identify someone who overuses either drugs or alcohol. According to Caring.org, recent studies have shown that approximately 53% of adults in the United States have reported that one or more of their close relatives has a drinking problem. Although alcohol is common, yet another common addiction, especially for teenagers, is that of drugs. Specifically in Jackson, marijuana is one of the most prominent.
By far for me, marijuana. So I've been an addiction doctor for over 20 years. I used to run a huge drug clinic in the city of Boston. There's more marijuana addiction in Jackson Township and North Canton than I ever saw in the inner city of Boston.
A factor that contributes to the use of alcohol and drugs is that there is an instant gratification and a guarantee that it will work.
People use because it feels good. I think that's where adults really miss the boat. They don't understand that this stuff feels good and it works. If it didn't work, nobody would use it. And what happens is it works so good that people want it to work more and more.
According to Dr. Meredith, the consequences of drug use are both immediate and certain. An individual might make an irrational decision by choosing a small but immediate reward over a larger but delayed reward.
The nature of addiction is that in the beginning it's pleasurable, and so people do it. And as I said, people who don't use substances don't get how pleasurable it is.
There are millions of heart-wrenching stories about the loss of loved ones due to the overuse of alcohol or drugs. Sadly, these stories are becoming more and more frequent. The impact drug addicts leave on those closest to them can be profound.
When I was in high school, I had a best friend. My best friend learned that he was gay, and he couldn't handle it. And he had a full scholarship to one of the most famous universities in the country, an Ivy League school. And halfway through his senior year, because of this, he started using drugs. And a year and a half later, he was dead from an overdose. And I made a promise to myself that I would help kids because of that. The reason 12-step programs work, and they're not particularly effective for teenagers, but why they work for adults is that they are treatments for shame, and they are absolutely brilliant. 12-step programs were invented in Akron, Ohio, and there are hundreds of millions of people who are enrolled in them. They're absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, they don't work for teenagers. The first step, I acknowledge that I am powerless. Give me a break. Other steps, I can't make my own decisions. I will listen to someone else to make my decisions for another year. I have hit rock bottom. None of those really appeal, but there are models of treatment for somebody who's a teenager.
For teenagers, different measures have to be taken to counteract these dangerous acts.
So if someone's addicted to marijuana, so to me that means that they're either a pothead or it means that they use so much that they neglect other parts of their life. So if that's true, cutting down hardly ever works. It just doesn't work. I wish it did. And the most common reason, or the most common, what's called reinforcer, thing which encourages usage is friends. So if you really want to stop marijuana, you will change your friend group, which stinks, but it is true. I have not ever met a single marijuana addict who's been able to, as a teenager, keep their friend group and not smoke.
Throughout the recovery process, there are obstacles, both mental and physical, that people have to overcome in order to return back to a healthy lifestyle. These obstacles are called withdrawal symptoms. Dr. Meredith described withdrawal symptoms as often having effects that are opposite of the direct effects of the drug. For example, if a drug makes an individual feel energized, withdrawal from the drug might make the person feel tired. The recovery process is taxing on the body and mind.
Addicts will say they're always in recovery. You'll never hear a true addict say, I am recovered. And that's because they know that they are but a usage away from starting over again.
A method to avoid the recovery process and the addiction overall is prevention. Many people think that if they use an addictive substance just once, they will not be affected, but the truth is, they very well could.
I have never met a single person who thought they would become addicted. Who would think you could pick up heroin and escape addiction? Every single heroin addict I've ever met thought it wouldn't be them.
Once you're addicted, it is a tough climb to return back to your old habits. If addicts had a choice, they would most likely not be in the situation they have gotten themselves into.
I think people think that people who don't use believe addicts want to be the way they do. They don't. They're trapped. I think they believe that they have moral deficits. They don't. Addicts know what they do. They just defend it against other people. I think people believe not everybody who uses becomes an addict, and that's a problem. So your parents say, don't ever use this stuff because you'll become, a deadbeat. And the truth is, a lot of people can use, and they don't become deadbeats. In fact, more people who use cocaine don't become addicts than do. And that's a problem for our society.
An addiction that seems much less dangerous on the surface, but is possible of doing much damage, is the overuse of cell phones and technology. Cell phones are highly portable and multifunctional, causing them to be in constant use for teenagers especially, but also adults. When asking students and faculty at Jackson High School if they have a cell phone, the unanimous answer was,
Yeah, I do.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
I do.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do.
We then asked a few more questions to the same groups of Jackson High School students and faculty and observed the responses.
Couple.
Right. Probably like 4 or 5. 3, 4.
About 15.
Day. Less than 1.
Probably 3. 24.
Not many, really. At night before bed, I usually watch documentaries.
I think so.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, oh for sure.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, it's like cocaine.
Students seemed highly aware that cell phones and technology are addictive, but are they willing to make a change for the better? Now that people are aware of this up-and-coming addiction, they need to respond and counteract it. Dr. Roberts, professor of marketing at Baylor University, said, "First, people need to be aware of how much time they spend on their cell phones. Awareness is always the first step to change. Then, everyone needs to set aside technology-free times and use this free time to reconnect with others. Healthy relationships are the cornerstones of happy people." Another misconception is that common addictions, such as ones relating to alcohol, drugs, gambling, or technology, are the only ones out there, but people can become addicted to anything.
I'm addicted to drinking paint.
I'm addicted to eating sand.
And I love sniffing and chewing dirty diapers. And I'm addicted to eating mattresses. And I'm addicted to eating bricks.
And I'm in a relationship with 15 inflatable animals.
And I'm addicted to eating play masks.
And I'm addicted to stinging myself with bees.
There's no denying that any form of addiction is bad because too much of anything will eventually lead to negative consequences. Habits are always hard to break, so it's best to avoid making them in the first place.
Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angels. Lonely as I am, together we cry. I drive on the street